Have you ever been told that the universe is a perfect and beautiful creation? That everything in the world, trees, stars, oceans, and people, was made by a loving, powerful God who designed it all with great care? Most of us grow up believing that the world is a masterpiece, a place created for a good purpose, where everything happens for a reason. But long ago, a group of people called the Gnostics believed something very different. Their ideas were strange, even shocking, and they said, "We've all been fooled." The Gnostics believed that the world we live in is not a masterpiece. It's not even real in the way we think. According to them, this world is a trap, a fake, a copy, a prison. The beauty we see around us hides something much darker, and the one who created it isn't who you think. Let's start from the beginning. The true beginning, according to the Gnostics, the real source of everything. At the top of the Gnostic story is a place that doesn't exist in space or time. It's not made of stars or planets or even thoughts. This place is called the Pleroma, which means fullness. It is the true home of divine power, a realm of pure light and perfect consciousness. There is no pain there, no fear, no war, and no death. Everything in the Pleroma is peaceful, balanced, and filled with love. The beings in the Pleroma are not like people. They are made of light and mind. They live in perfect harmony. They don't fight or rule over each other. They don't have bodies. They just are. These beings are called eons, pure powers that flow out from the Pleroma like rays of sunlight from the sun. Each eon is paired with another, one male and one female, and they work together in balance. One of these eons was named Sophia, which means wisdom. She was one of the most powerful beings in the Pleroma. But Sophia did something that had never been done before. She broke the rules. The accident that changed everything. All the eons in the Pleroma were supposed to create together in pairs. That kept things in balance. But Sophia acted alone. She tried to create something without her male partner. Nobody knows exactly why she did it. Maybe she was curious. Maybe she wanted to explore. Maybe she made a mistake. Whatever the reason, Sophia's act created something unexpected and terrible. Instead of giving birth to a pure being of light, she created a broken, confused being. This being was not full of love. It was full of darkness, confusion, and pride. It didn't know where it came from, and it couldn't see the light of the Pleroma. It was cut off from the source. This being was named Yaldabaoth, but the Gnostics also called him Yerar, and sometimes just the Demiurge, which means false creator. Yaldabaoth thought he was the only god. He looked around and saw no one else like him, so he believed he was the highest power. He didn't know he had come from Sophia's mistake. Yaldabaoth said something that shocked the Gnostics. "I am God, and there is no one beside me." That quote came straight from ancient texts. But instead of seeing that as wise or holy, the Gnostics saw it as a red flag, a warning, because no true being of light would say such a thing. Sophia was horrified. She had made something twisted, something that couldn't understand its place in the great chain of light. She tried to hide Yaldabaoth in the lowest, farthest realms away from the Pleroma, but it was too late. A world built in darkness. Yaldabaoth did not just sit in the dark and stay hidden. No, he used his power. He created something terrible. The physical world. Yes, the same world we live in. The stars, the planets, the earth, the animals, even human beings. He made them all. But he didn't create them out of love or joy. He made them to rule over them. He wanted power, he wanted worship, and he wanted control. He built the world as a kind of prison, a copy of the real light-filled world above, but distorted, upside down. This world has beauty in it, yes. Trees grow tall, the stars shine, and music makes us feel things we can't explain. But it also has death, disease, war, and pain. That's because this world was not made by the true source. It was made by a blind creator who didn't understand what he was doing. And he didn't stop there. Yaldabaoth created helpers to guard his kingdom. These were called the Archons. Think of them like prison guards or system administrators. Their job was to keep souls locked inside this fake reality. They made sure nobody could escape the physical world and return to the pleroma, the 7 layers of the trap. To make sure souls couldn't get back to the source, Yaldabaoth set up layers of reality, 7 of them. Each layer was like a locked gate, a filter, a wall between the soul and the truth. The Archons guarded each level, making sure that no one could break through. The sky, you see, that's just the surface. Below it are levels of control, like a hidden maze that keeps your mind from remembering where you came from. The senses you use every day, sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell, are part of the trap. The world of matter, the body you live in, the thoughts you think, they are all shaped by the system Yaldabaoth built. You don't see the trap because it was designed that way. The Gnostics believed that every time a person tried to awaken, through deep thinking, meditation, or spiritual insight, they faced resistance. That's because the Archons were guarding each level. They didn't want anyone escaping. They didn't want anyone to remember the light. Even dreams, visions, and mystical experiences can be blocked or twisted by the system. That's why it's so hard to know the truth. The entire world is designed to make sure you never figure it out. But the Gnostics weren't guessing. They said they had seen the structure. They mapped it out. They wrote it down in texts like the Apocryphon of John and the Hypostasis of the Archons. These were not poems or legends. They were escape manuals, blueprints showing how to break free. Yaldabaoth's kingdom didn't run by itself. After building the physical world, he needed control. So he created the Archons, not just creatures, but actual systems of control built into the universe itself. They weren't like cartoon villains. They weren't horned devils or shadow monsters hiding in corners. The Archons worked from behind the scenes. They blended into everything. You couldn't see them, but they were always there, watching, shaping, and guiding people in the wrong direction. The Gnostics said the Archons controlled how we think. They didn't just stop us from knowing the truth. They programmed ideas into our minds, ideas that made us believe the fake world was the only real one. These beings infected thoughts, twisted time, and messed with space itself. They shaped history, language, and belief systems to make sure no one ever questioned the system. They weren't just guarding the outside. They were inside, too. They made sure human thoughts stayed stuck in survival, fear, and routine. According to the Gnostics, every time you felt confused, trapped, or helpless, that wasn't random. It was part of the Archon's design. The trap wasn't just physical, it was psychological and spiritual. This is why the Gnostics believed escaping the system was so difficult. It wasn't about just walking away or being good. Every time someone tried to find the truth, they ran into barriers. Meditation, deep thinking, and even spiritual practices triggered resistance. The Archons didn't want you to wake up. They wanted your divine light to stay asleep, stuck in a body, locked in the lower realms, believing lies. They believed the Archons fed off this control. They weren't just stopping souls. They were feeding on them. The system worked like a machine, and human ignorance was its fuel. The more confused and distracted people were, the stronger the system became. That's why the Gnostics wrote their teachings as technical manuals, not myths. These weren't bedtime stories or symbolic parables. They were maps, step-by-step outlines of how the universe worked, how the trap was built, and how to get out. In books like The Apocryphon of John, The Hypostasis of the Archons, and Trimorphic Protonoia, the Gnostics laid out every part of the structure. They even described the dimensions and the beings who ruled them. They said that the soul didn't rise into the light the way many religions teach. It didn't go upward into heaven as a reward. Instead, it had to climb out of a dark prison. It had to move through 7 layers of lies, shedding illusions one by one. The soul wasn't ascending toward the top. It was trying to return to something beyond the entire structure. The pleroma, the true source that existed before everything went wrong. To make things worse, the system wasn't just upside down, it was inside out. The highest realms in this world, the ones that seem the most holy, the most full of light, were actually the most corrupted. The Gnostics believed that what we call heaven in mainstream religion was often the most dangerous illusion of all. That's because Yaldabaoth wanted to copy the real light. He imitated it. But his version was twisted. His light looked divine, but wasn't. It was flashy, full of rules, and demanded obedience. He created a fake order to keep people chasing salvation in the wrong direction. He made people believe that his power was sacred, that laws and punishments were holy, and that submission was the path to truth. This wasn't a mistake. It was his design. He created this world to be a place of control, not freedom. A place of structure, not spirit. A place of obedience, not awakening. And the Archons were his agents. They enforced the rules of this illusion. They controlled society, belief systems, even emotions. The Gnostics warned, the more people worship the system, the deeper they fall into it. That's why so many of their teachings were about remembering. Not learning, not achieving, but remembering. Because the soul already knows the truth. It's just buried. Buried under false beliefs. Buried under fear. Buried under distractions like money, war, work, pleasure, politics, fame, and tradition. Buried under religion. The Gnostics said the biggest trap was religion itself. Not because spiritual life was bad, but because the system turned it into something fake. A mirror of truth that pointed people in the wrong direction. That brings us to one of the most shocking ideas in Gnostic belief. The God most people worship isn't the real God at all. The God of rules, punishment, jealousy, and sacrifice. The God who said, I am God and there is no other, was Yaldabaoth. They didn't mean that as poetry. They meant it literally. The Gnostics believed that Yaldabaoth, the blind false creator, was the same being described in the Old Testament. The same one who created the earth, gave commandments, demanded sacrifice, and punished those who disobeyed. He wasn't a symbol. He was real. And he was not the true God. He was the one who mistook himself for God. To the Gnostics, that wasn't just a mistake. It was the foundation of a system of slavery. A system that got worse when his version of power was turned into religion, government, and law. Institutions began to copy his model. They created hierarchies, demanded obedience, and punished rebellion. All of it based on the false idea that the world was made by the highest being. But it wasn't. The real God, the true source, never created this world in its current form. The physical universe, as we know it, wasn't part of the original divine plan. It came from a mistake, from Sophia's fall, from Yaldabaoth's pride, from a rupture in the pleroma that never should have happened. That's why the Gnostics didn't look for salvation in temples or rituals. They didn't trust the official stories. They believed awakening came from inside, from the spark of light buried deep within each soul. They called this spark the pneuma, the breath of the true source. Every person has it. Even Yaldabaoth used it, though he didn't understand it. He used the stolen divine light to create life, but not out of love, out of control. He created bodies not to free souls, but to trap them. That's why the material world has both beauty and suffering. It's not purely evil. It contains stolen pieces of light, but it's been built in a broken way by a being who didn't know what he was doing. The result is a world that seems real, but isn't. A world that feels holy, but hides a lie. And that lie reaches deep. It shows up in everything. Belief systems, institutions, and even the stories people tell about who they are. People grow up believing they were born to serve a God who punishes and rewards. But in the Gnostic worldview, that God is not the real one. He's the jailer, not the Father. The true Father, the Source, is beyond all of this. Beyond heaven, beyond light and dark, beyond the 7 layers. He doesn't demand worship. He doesn't punish. He simply is. And he wants the sparks of light, the parts of himself lost in this dark world, to find their way home. But to do that, the light inside you has to remember what it is. It has to wake up. And for that to happen, something or someone had to enter the system and trigger that awakening. The moment is coming. But the Gnostic story doesn't end there. The Gnostics believed that after Yaldabaoth created the material world and placed archons to control it, the system grew stronger. People began to worship the one who made the world, thinking he was the true God. Over time, this false creator system turned into organized religion. It shaped laws, governments, schools, and traditions. The whole world became a reflection of his kingdom, full of rules, punishments, and control. But Gnostics did not agree with that version of God. They said the being worshipped by most religions was not the source of life, but a false god. The real source, the Pleroma, was beyond all this. It wasn't angry or jealous. It didn't demand sacrifice. It didn't make rules. It simply was pure light and truth. To the Gnostics, the system Yaldabaoth built wasn't just a mistake. It became a prison. And religion was a part of that prison. Instead of helping people find freedom, religion taught them to obey. It taught them to trust outside authorities. It taught them to fear. And worst of all, it kept them from discovering the divine spark inside themselves. The Gnostics said that spark was the key. Every person had it. It came from the Pleroma. It was the true self, the part of each person that didn't belong to the world of matter, time, or death. But that spark was asleep, buried deep inside, forgotten under layers of lies. This is where the Gnostics told a different story about Christ. The version most people know says Christ was sent by God to die for our sins, that he was here to bring salvation through faith, law, and obedience. But the Gnostics disagreed. They said that story had been changed, edited, and reshaped by those who served the system. The original Christ, the Gnostic Christ, was something else entirely. According to the Gnostics, Christ was not sent by Yaldabaoth. He didn't come to obey the system. He didn't come to start a new religion. He came to expose the system and break it. The Gnostic Christ came from the Pleroma. He wasn't trapped in the system like humans were. He passed through the archons and entered the material world with full knowledge of who he was. His mission wasn't to be worshipped. It was to wake people up. He didn't come to teach blind faith. He came to teach gnosis, which means inner knowing, Gnosis wasn't belief, it wasn't tradition, it wasn't law, it was remembering. Remembering who you are, where you came from, and why you were trapped. The Gnostic Christ didn't say, follow the rules and you'll go to heaven. He said, the kingdom is within you. He told people to look inside, not outside. He didn't demand rituals or temples. He spoke in ways that triggered deep recognition, as if the soul was hearing something it had always known but had forgotten. This version of Christ wasn't a lawgiver or a sacrifice. He was a code breaker, a liberator, a living message from the Pleroma meant to help people break free from Yaldabaoth's illusion. The early Gnostic texts captured this version of Christ. Books like the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, and Pistis Sophia told a completely different story. These texts weren't like the Bible stories most people know. They didn't focus on miracles or events. They focused on words, short, powerful sayings that went straight into the heart. In the Gospel of Thomas, Christ says, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. That wasn't a metaphor. It was a message about the divine spark inside, the pneuma, the one thing the archons couldn't copy or destroy. In the Gospel of Philip, Christ exposes the system of false sacraments. He talks about how marriage, baptism, and rituals have been twisted into tools of control. The book teaches the true union is not between bodies, but between the soul and gnosis. Then there's Pistis Sophia, one of the most detailed Gnostic texts. It talks about Sophia's fall, the layers of the universe, and the soul's journey through the trap set by the archons. It's not a storybook. It's a survival manual for anyone trying to remember the truth and return to the source. One of the most shocking Gnostic texts is the Gospel of Judas. In it, Judas is not a traitor. He's the only disciple who truly understood Christ's mission. Judas didn't betray Christ. He helped him escape the prison of the physical body. According to this story, Christ's death wasn't a punishment. It was part of a spiritual jailbreak, a planned move to return to the Pleroma and finish the mission. These texts were powerful, too powerful. That's why they were banned, burned, hidden. The early church didn't argue with them. They destroyed them. Because if people read them and believed them, the whole system would fall apart. But not all the Gnostic writings were lost. Some were buried in jars in places like Nag Hammadi, Egypt. In 1945, those hidden texts were discovered after centuries of silence. Inside were writings that didn't match the Bible. They didn't follow the rules of the church. They were counter-programming, words written to wake people up from a dream they didn't know they were in. The Gnostics didn't just talk about another religion. They revealed another structure of reality, a different universe, a hidden history, a spiritual war being fought, not with swords, but with knowledge, not in the sky, but inside every person. Their message was clear. You don't need a priest. You don't need a building. You don't need laws or rituals. You need to wake up. You need to remember. And once you do, the system around you begins to crack. But the archons didn't give up. The false creator didn't give up. The world continued building structures of obedience. And the Gnostic teachings were buried again, this time under distraction, entertainment, and fear. Yet the spark is still there. The Gnostics believed the most dangerous part of the entire system was not the physical world. It wasn't pain, sickness, or death. It wasn't even the archons or Yaldabaoth himself. The most dangerous part was forgetting who you are. That forgetfulness, called spiritual amnesia, was the key to keeping the trap in place. The system didn't want to destroy the divine spark inside you. It couldn't. The spark, called pneuma, came from the true source, the Pleroma, It was indestructible. It couldn't be broken, but it could be buried. And that's exactly what the system did. Yaldabaoth and the Archons created a world full of noise, fear, and distraction. They built bodies to trap the spark. They designed the senses to keep people focused on the outside world, on what they could touch, see, and hear. And most of all, they gave people beliefs that made them forget their true identity. These beliefs were powerful. They came in the form of culture, religion, and tradition. People were told they were just human, just flesh and blood, born in sin, ruled by gods, judged by laws. They were told to obey, to submit, and to never ask too many questions. According to the Gnostics, this wasn't just a mistake. It was a designed system, a spiritual machine built to extract light and keep it locked away. The goal wasn't to help humans grow. It was to keep them small, quiet, and controlled. But the Gnostics also taught something else, something shocking. They said you don't belong to the system at all. You were never meant to be here. You came from outside the system. Your true origin is not Earth, not the stars, not even the heavens described in holy books. You come from the Pleroma, the realm of light, the place of divine fullness. You are not just a body. You are a piece of eternity, wrapped in flesh. The Gnostics said that humanity didn't come into existence through divine love. It came through spiritual theft. Yaldabaoth saw the light in the higher realms and wanted it for himself. But he couldn't create true life. He could only imitate it. He built bodies, vessels, and forms, shells that looked like living beings, but were empty. Then something happened that wasn't part of the plan. A spark of true light entered one of those bodies. No one knows exactly how it happened. Some texts say it was an accident. Others say it was a breach in the system. But however it happened, once the divine spark entered matter, everything changed. That spark gave the body something Yaldabaoth didn't expect. Awareness. The being became more than just flesh. It had spirit. It had memory, curiosity, and power. And it couldn't be fully controlled. This was a disaster for Yaldabaoth and the Archons. They had created a being that was part flesh and part light, connected to both the trap and the source beyond it. That being was humanity, and that's why everything in the system was redesigned to suppress the spark, not destroy it. Well, they couldn't destroy it, so they buried it deeper. That's why the world is filled with distractions: money, power, war, entertainment, fear. That's why people are trained to follow leaders, repeat beliefs, and avoid deep questions. That's why there are endless rules and rituals, traditions and stories that all point you away from yourself and towards some external power. The Gnostics said, this isn't sin. It's not karma. It's not punishment. It's not about earning your way to heaven. It's a containment system. A structure designed to keep you from realizing who you truly are and where you really came from. And the only thing that could break that structure was Gnosis. Gnosis is not belief. It's not learning new facts or following a new religion. Gnosis is direct knowing, a deep personal awakening that happens inside you. It's when the spark inside remembers the Pleroma, when it knows without being told, when it sees through the illusion. The Gnostics taught that Gnosis doesn't come from books, temples, or priests. It comes from within. It's not taught. It's remembered. And that's what made it so dangerous. Yaldabaoth's system could handle religions. It could handle moral codes, prayers, and sacrifices. It could even handle rebellions and revolutions. But it couldn't handle Gnosis, because Gnosis bypasses the system completely. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't follow rules. It doesn't need approval from anyone. Once a person awakens, the system starts to break down from the inside. The Archons lose their grip. The false god loses his power. The walls begin to crack. That's why the Gnostics were hunted. Their teachings were burned, their voices were erased, not because they were silly or superstitious, but because they were accurate. They had found the blueprint of the trap. They had figured out how to escape. Gnosis is not peace and quiet. It's fire in the machine. It's the moment you realize the prison was never real, and you never truly belong there. It's the moment you stop asking for freedom and start claiming it. And once the spark ignites, the control grid starts to shake. The Archons cannot copy Gnosis. They cannot imitate it. They cannot stop it once it starts, because it's the one thing that wasn't built by them. It came from the place they can't reach, the Pleroma. Gnosis is the virus in the code. It is the only signal that breaks through all the veils. It is the weapon of awakening. Not to fight others, but to free yourself. Once awakened, you're not just aware. You're ungovernable. Not politically, but spiritually. You no longer fit into the system. You no longer respond to the lies. You no longer believe the story you were told about who you are. And that, to the Gnostics, was the beginning of real liberation. But the story isn't over yet. The Gnostics knew that once a person awakened, they were no longer easy to control. But that awakening was rare because the entire system was built to stop it. Every layer of society, every belief system, every distraction was carefully designed to keep the divine spark inside humans from ever remembering its true nature. This control didn't just come from outside, like rules, leaders, or laws. It came from the inside, too, from the body. In Gnostic teachings, the body wasn't a gift. It wasn't a sacred creation meant to honor the soul. It was a containment unit, built to hold the divine spark down. The physical body, with all its needs and limits, wasn't just a natural form, it was a prison. Yaldabaoth and his Archons created the body as a trap, a vessel to keep the light seal in. The body would age, hunger, feel pain, get tired, and eventually die. And during that time, the mind inside would be too busy dealing with survival to ask deeper questions. The Gnostics believed that the Archons shaped the body to keep the light focused on the material world, on eating, working, reproducing, obeying. The more attached the spark became to the body and its experiences, the more it forgot its true self. And the Archons didn't stop at the body. They infected language, ideas, and culture. They filled the world with thoughts that sounded wise but were actually traps. They taught people to seek approval, to follow rules, to fear punishment, and to worship external gods. Even love could be twisted. The Archons turned love into guilt. They turned freedom into law. They turned light into ritual. They took sacred truth and wrapped it in ceremonies that looked holy, but were empty. Every time a spiritual teaching became organized, systemized, and controlled, the Gnostics saw the hand of the Archons at work. To them, this wasn't just bad luck. It was strategy. The Archons couldn't stop the light, but they could confuse it, distract it, wear it down. They used normalization as their tool. They made the false world seem natural, expected, and inescapable. They convinced people that what they saw and felt was the only reality that existed. And most people believed it. The Archons weren't demons with horns. They didn't appear in flames or shadows. They didn't need to. Their control was deeper. It was psychological and energetic. It worked through repetition, belief, and emotional patterns. That's why the Gnostics described the Archons not as myth, but as real forces built into the fabric of the universe, like hidden code in a computer program. They were the gatekeepers of the Matrix, the firewall that blocked souls from waking up. The Archons ruled the 7 planetary spheres, Each one was like a spiritual checkpoint between Earth and the higher realms. They controlled the flow of thought. They filtered dreams, visions, even near-death experiences. Every attempt to break through the illusion had to pass through them. And even when a soul managed to reach these higher realms after death, the journey wasn't safe. The Gnostic text said the Archons waited at each level, asking trick questions, using fear, guilt, and lies to drag the soul back down. The only way past them was Gnosis, because Gnosis wasn't just knowledge, it was a kind of spiritual key, a recognition so deep that the Archons couldn't block it. Once you knew your true origin, they had no power over you. This is why the Gnostics saw every part of life in the material world as part of the trap, not just politics or religion, but even the human form itself. They believed that the flesh was formed by the Archons under the guidance of Yaldabaoth. He didn't create the body out of love. He didn't shape it to honor the divine. He built it to be a cage, to hold the divine spark in place, to tie it to time, space, and decay. This is also why the Gnostics said that what we see as normal is actually the most dangerous illusion. Because it doesn't look evil, it doesn't feel wrong, it feels familiar, safe, natural. But it's not. The Archons built a world that mimics the divine realm, a world that copies the structure of the Pleroma, but leaves out the light. They made faulty replicas of the real thing, institutions that look holy, relationships that feel meaningful, systems that seem fair, but none of them hold true divine wisdom. Because the Archons didn't understand light, they only knew how to copy it, and their copies were always broken. They feared human consciousness, not because humans were powerful in the body, but because of what was hidden inside them. The pneuma, the spark from the source. That spark couldn't be manufactured, couldn't be predicted, and it scared them. Because once it awakened, it started to override their systems. It began to crack the simulation from the inside. So the Archons did what they could. They kept the spark distracted, focused on survival, pleasure, fear, external authority, anything except direct inner knowledge. They spread false ideas through systems of education, entertainment, religion, and social norms. They whispered in thoughts. They tangled people in conflict, fear, and comparison. The Gnostics warn, every time you give your power to something outside of yourself, you feed the system. This is why they saw spiritual passivity as a danger. It wasn't enough to be kind or moral or religious. If you didn't awaken, you stayed trapped. If you followed the rules of the system, even if you meant well, you helped maintain it. The Archons fed off that ignorance, not just because it kept you down, but because it kept the system alive. And that's the part the Gnostics said had been deleted from your origin story. The part where you learn that you don't come from this world. You're not a product of matter. You're not a creation of the false god. You're not a body. You're not just human. You are a divine being, with light older than the stars hidden under layers of illusion. You're not broken. You're buried. The Gnostics wanted people to stop looking for salvation in the sky, in temples, in leaders, or in laws. They said, look inward, the truth is already there, covered but not erased. And the deeper you remember, the weaker the system becomes. Because when the spark fully awakens, it can't be stopped, and the story of the system begins to end. But the full collapse has not happened yet.